Colorado is committed to the goal of every student reading at grade level by third grade. Statewide progress in recent years has benefited from the sustained vision, leadership, and collaboration of its foundation community with elected officials and educators.
Colorado and Denver have made great strides toward the goal of third grade level reading by combining policy with ambitious program development, and most importantly, alignment among elected officials, state and local agencies, school districts, nonprofits, visionary foundation leaders working together. This is how it's done.
Colorado's vision for young children is expressed in the Early Childhood Colorado Framework, initially created in 2008 and redesigned in 2015 to better reflect today's priorities. Creating a shared vision and pathways for collaboration is key to building early childhood systems and ultimately a Colorado where all children are valued, healthy, and thriving.
So the framework grew out of 20 years' work. And when I was lieutenant governor, I realized that we had a chance in my office to really show people where there was a lot of work being done for kids, where there was a gap, nothing being done, and to pull the groups together who could figure out how to be comprehensive in the kind of communities and state we create for children.
This vision is shepherded by the Early Childhood Leadership Commission. The role of the ECLC is to be a statewide leader, subject matter expert, and champion of best and promising practices throughout the state. The ECLC has been on the forefront of coordinated action in the areas of mental health, communications, and advancement of quality and access in early care and education.
It is an advisory council that is comprised of 20 people from a whole variety of sectors.
We do have business leaders who are invested in making sure that all children have the supports and the services that they need to be able to read when they get to school and are reading at grade level by the time they get to third grade.
Under Governor Hickenlooper's leadership, the Colorado Reading to Ensure Academic Development Act, Colorado READ Act, was passed during the 2012 legislative session. The goals: identify struggling readers as early as possible, take action with interventions, and share accountability for reading outcomes with teachers, administrators, parents, and students. Since its passage, the rates of children identified as having a significant reading deficiency have decreased every year.
The READ Act was in response to starting to see that the test scores of Colorado kids are in reading, especially the foundational reading skills between preschool and third grade, were not where they needed to be, and that it made success in school as kids move through harder and harder. So a number of legislators and advocacy groups decided to set standards for early reading and to require that districts respond with tutoring, summer academies, a whole array of activities to boost reading.
The governor also established the Office of Early Childhood in the Colorado Department of Human Services to provide more coordinated and impactful services for children and families. The Office of Early Childhood has achieved great gains, increasing the quality of early care and learning for children most at risk, and providing additional supports for parents in their roles as the first and most important teacher.
We had a tradition of early childhood issues being handled either in the governor or lieutenant governor's office. And we got to a point where that just didn't seem sustainable. So creating an office that was in state government seemed like the next step forward in pushing early childhood as a legitimate area for policymakers to address.
Locally, Denver is incubating key grade-level reading strategies in different ways. The Denver Preschool Program, Countdown to Kindergarten, Denver Plan 2020's Early Literacy Plan, and the Birth to 8 Roadmap. The Denver Preschool Program helps make preschool possible for all Denver families, regardless of income, through tuition support and access to information. Denver has one of the highest enrollment rates in the nation for city pre-K programs, third in the nation. In addition to a focus on access for all Denver's 4-year-olds, DPP works to improve preschool quality, studies how preschool affects kindergarten readiness, and is a national advocate for excellence in early childhood education.
The preschool program helps us to provide resources to every family in Denver to give them access to quality preschool program and make sure kids are ready to hit kindergarten.
Denver preschool program has really played a key role in improving quality across our system. The key is yes, we want access, but we want children to have quality experiences.
Denver wants all families, both parents and children, to feel welcome when they walk through a school's kindergarten door. Countdown to Kindergarten, led by the Office of Children's Affairs under Denver Mayor Michael Hancock, is a community-wide effort established to better inform parents of preschool-aged kids on school readiness and the importance of their role in the academic achievement of their children in kindergarten and beyond. In its initial stages, more than 420 families have participated in early literacy training sessions, resource fairs, and school choice workshops.
It's very important for us that we're putting Countdown to Kindergarten programs in neighborhoods that have what we call limited opportunity. And so we focus our efforts in those neighborhoods where we know that kids need greater supports.
At roughly the same time, Denver Public Schools built and launched the Early Literacy Plan as a part of the Denver Plan 2020. With ambitious goals for dramatically improving grade-level reading, it focused the district's attention on the assessments, interventions, parent engagement, and resources required to achieve that improvement.
The Denver 2020 plan focuses more on early literacy because Denver Public Schools understood the importance of reading by third grade proficiently. And so students being able to learn to read by third grade and reading to learn after third grade is critical.
In 2016, the City of Denver, Denver Public Schools, and numerous early childhood community partners came together to launch the Denver Birth to 8 Roadmap. Building off the Early Childhood Colorado framework, the roadmap brings together Denver Public Schools, the mayor's office, and community stakeholders in a mission to support and empower families living in neighborhoods of concentrated poverty so that their young children reach their developmental potential and succeed in school and in life, starting with early language and literacy.
The roadmap in our various roles really allowed us to simply say, DPS, you take care of what's on the inside of that school door. The City of Denver's job is to take care of what's on the other side of that school door.
DPS is making very intentional efforts to improve growth in reading scores in their classrooms where children are still reading behind grade level. And that's their specialty, and we rely on them to do that. We really recognize the city role looks different, and so what are those services and supports that we do and that we bring to the table to help move this really large, ambitious goal?
Progress we've made in Colorado is really because of individuals and advocacy organizations. Now we're at a point where we can get very large systems to work together so that parents and children experience early childhood and early reading as a smooth continuum.
Those young people who are in the early childhood education classrooms and in kindergarten, that's our future. Those young people, they're the next mayor, the next governor, the next business tycoon, the next nurse doctor, are sitting in those classrooms, and we have a responsibility to make sure we prepare them.
Denver welcomes the campaign for grade-level reading.
Thank you again, Lori and Rocky Mountain PBS. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Bruce Hoyt from Gary Community Investments. But I would have to say, in a more important role, never mind your day job, this gentleman ran a company and served 8 years on the Denver School Board in rather tumultuous times. And thank you. Bruce Hoyt.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Denver. We're thrilled to start the day with you, and also encourage everybody here to, at the end of today, please ride the light rail down to our offices in the heart of downtown Denver, where we can test Barbara O'Brien's theory on drinking at altitude. I look forward to that. I'm very honored to have this panel in front of me. 3 of the most distinguished leaders in the Denver community doing this work with us today. We have Ann Anderson, who's the Director of Early Childhood Development for the Ben and Luciana Walton Family Foundation. We have Elsa Holquin, a Senior Program Officer of Child and Family Development for the Rose Community Foundation. And right next to me, Susan Steele, who's the Executive Director of the Buell Foundation. So these three panelists will be taking us through some of Denver's accomplishments, thinking about some of the current challenges and what we think we can take advantage of over the next 5 years in terms of opportunities. I think that the timing of this gathering is terrific from my perspective. Having really been deeply immersed in this work now for the last year and a half as part of my day job, I can tell you the breadth and momentum I see is really astonishing. A couple of examples of that. Tom Boasberg, the superintendent of Denver Public Schools, at a recent public forum was asked, what are the next key steps to move Denver Public Schools forward? He talked about early childhood education, and he talked about social and emotional supports for children as two of the main focus areas of Denver Public Schools. We've got a lot of very successful charter management organizations in Denver driving a lot of student achievement gains. 3 of them have moved forward and have changed from a K-5 model to now providing 4-year-old and even 3-year-old care as part of their education continuum. We hosted a meeting of state department leaders in our conference room several months ago, and whether it was the head of transportation, human services, labor, economic development, every one of them discussed their work in a 2-generational lens, thinking about those kids as part of the work they need to do with the adults. You've heard from our city leader. We have a Chamber of Commerce who've listed education as a key driver for business and one of their top priorities. And finally, civic leaders who've started to talk about early childhood education through an equity lens. So with all these forces coming together and developing that momentum, we know that the time is now to press forward with our agenda. And in doing that, I thought we'd first reflect on what got us to this point. And Elsa, I'd like to start with you, and could tell us about the public-private partnership role.
Certainly. Well, first thing, I think it is a pleasure to be here and to be hosting you for the conference. It is it's always fun when we get to not only share what we have learned in Colorado, but also to learn from you, what you're learning in your communities and how we can move this work forward. So welcome. Public-private partnerships have really been at the core of the work in early childhood in Colorado. We have been very lucky that we not only have elected officials, not only have appointed officials that have been willing to engage with the philanthropic community and to work together, but also with the nonprofit community to move the needle forward in terms of early childhood. I think we have a significant place. About 10 years ago, when Lieutenant Governor O'Brien came to office, and we moved forward a lot of the work that we're going to be featuring today. But I have to tell you that it was even before that we started working together. It was really working at the city level and foundations learning how to work with government. It's not often that you see those things happening very closely, but I have to tell you that we spent 10 years before we went to work with Lieutenant Governor O'Brien working together in some things that were very successful and some things that were not quite so successful. But the process itself showed us how to work together. And I always say, these partnerships are not going to move in the process that we like, on the timeline that we like, but they are going to move at the speed that we can develop trust. And the speed of trust was 10 years of learning together, working together, and learning how to do it all over again when things didn't work the way that we wanted to do it. So we were ready as a community. So by the time Lieutenant Governor O'Brien came to office, we knew that it was our chance to really ensure that early childhood was one of the top priorities at the state level. We worked closely in developing what we call our Early Childhood Colorado Framework. This framework was what guided us, was the vision for early childhood. It guided us on how to move forward the work that we wanted to create in Colorado. It was a huge accomplishment for us, but we quickly realized that that framework also needed to have 2 pieces. One was leadership, and creating the leadership was the commission. The commission was started through the Lieutenant Governor's office. Eventually, it was approved through legislation, failed the first time, but we learned and did it all over again and passed the second time. This is the history of what we have done sometimes in Colorado. But that commission really allowed us to move forward to the second major accomplishment, and that is to get some of the results that we wanted to get in creating an Office of Early Childhood, and then eventually have the funding that was the Race to the Top funding the Early Learning Challenge Fund, which was almost $50 million. Lieutenant Governor O'Brien not only helped us start this process, but helped us create the process for the next administration. And under Lieutenant Governor Joe Garcia, we had the opportunity to continue the work. This is pretty unique in our state, that we have been able to say we have a champion for early childhood at the governor's office, and we have a cabinet at that level doing the work. And I have to say, it started with the work that happens at the city level.
Well, I love that phrase, working at the speed of trust. That's terrific. Susan, can you talk to us a little bit about the role and collaboration in this work?
Sure. Building on what Elsa had to say, it's all about relationships, it's all about collaboration. There certainly was collaboration with governmental entities, but just as importantly, there was huge, and continues to be, huge collaboration among the foundations here in Colorado. Those that are Denver-centric and those that serve the whole state and those that actually serve this state and a few others. So that's a very different place to be. Showing my age a little bit here, but in '96, when we were talking about this and when my own foundation was getting into early childhood, foundations did not communicate and collaborate all that much. It was kind of a secret what everyone did, and no one went to the other person's office to pull their annual report or their 990 to see what their work was. So if nobody was talking about it, you just didn't know. Like I said, it was a secret. So something in about that, the mid-90s changed in the idea of, wouldn't it be smart in all areas, early childhood of course, but in all philanthropic areas, if we all talked to one another, if we communicated, heaven forbid, actually collaborate in partnership and things. So that was a very unique spot for us in Colorado. In 1996, actually sort of egged on by the Junior League of Denver, we all, those of us that sort of thought about early childhood, started getting together and talking about it. So 20-some years later, 21 years later, we still have a very active early childhood funders group. It meets monthly. It is about education, learning about topics, learning about what's going on. It's also about interactions, relationship building, mentoring, those kinds of things going on. And it's also about sort of taking the time to identify some key issues that working together clearly is going to make more sense for. And so we do that on a regular basis on all sorts of different topics, bringing in the relevant people, whether it's our advocacy organization or whether often it is our public-private partnership, the Office of Early Childhood, or maybe the Department of Education. So I think as a single piece, that has been really unique. Remember, that's about relationships, and the part about that that's so cool is, so Elsa ran it for the first 7 years, and I ran it for the next 13 years. So you can see we've had a little time to get to know each other and to get to feel comfortable with what we're talking about. And Ann, oh, you're just a newbie, only 6 years maybe or something.
Handing the torch. Handing the torch. Isn't that what Barbara said?
That's right. But I think really importantly, you can see if you work together that long, when people talk and sit around the table, you really respect one another. You are able to step back and say, what could you do that I can't do? We're not funding right now 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, but you can. So that key piece about people that can make a difference, that do have the money to do some unusual things, coming together and picking issues and making a difference, and putting money in. There were many times we would sit around the table and say, we have this project to do. I'll go ask for 10, I'll go ask for 10, I'll go find 15, and sort of throw it on the table and let's get it done. Not throw it in a pot and have to go through all of that, but say, we believe in this and let's do it together. So informally making that happen. And we would do that around projects. We would do that, I know, mentioned earlier about possible new ideas that we might want to look at, but it also particularly there was that kind of work around governance when we didn't, as you all know, the non-system of early childhood systems, right? So trying to find ways to organize and coordinate our governance in our state was a big focus of this. One other part of that, and then I will move on, but one of the things that's really unusual about it is people that participated there now are in other roles. You saw Lisa Roy on the film, who's at DPS now, heading early childhood, who was twice at funding organizations and joined the Funders Collaborative. So not only do we get to know each other in that role, but we also get to go out and work with them as partners and friends in other roles as we all change. There are a couple really excellent, more recent examples of our work. One of those is Early Milestones, Colorado. The three of us on the stage and three other core funders in the idea of early childhood came together a couple of years ago and said, we need to have an organization that doesn't sit in government quite, that doesn't have direct services to do, that can be available sort of instantaneously, right, Jennifer? When we need to move forward on things, whether it's facilitating a process, whether it's helping bring pilots come in, whether it's doing planning, we need this nonpartisan intermediary organization to help us do some work. Candidly and frankly, we needed it to be able to put our money in sometimes to get some things done when there wasn't an entity out there already that could do it. So that's Early Milestones, Colorado. And we have been very pleased with the success of it and the way that it's been welcomed by our community, both on the nonprofit side, the governmental side, and the private foundation side, and the community foundation side as a real factor for a real opportunity for us to do some of these things. It's about being nonpartisan. It's about being flexible and fast and being able to get things done in a really quick way. No disparaging on government, but that is not what they do and can do. And so we really wanted to find a way to practice some things and look at some things in a timely manner. And they've been instrumental in several things going on right now, including the DPS roadmap, I think Ann's going to talk about later, and one other one, which was the Launch Together project. Bruce mentioned the idea of early childhood social, emotional, mental health, the importance of all of that that we know now is so important. So an interesting story about that is talking about collaborating, not only the sort of regular early childhood funders, but the health funders that have a real interest in mental health began to look at this issue of early childhood mental health and the families that surround them. And we're very interested in about 2014 and how does that all work? They would call and talk and they'd say, well, we don't, we have to fund in the health arena, but we know it's important in early childhood. How can we do that? And a lot of time was spent, about 18 months was spent for them, primarily health, but also more traditional early childhood funders, sitting around learning about it, learning about opportunities, right? Elsa sat in that group for all those months, and learning about what we could do together. Again, all of this group of people doing their part, whatever their part is, supported by their boards, whatever that meant, to be able to move forward this really vital area of early childhood mental health that we didn't really have our arms around yet. The amazing part of that, 8 foundations came together in a matter of a few short months, raised $11.5 million and said, let's go. And contracted with Early Milestones Colorado with an excellent, excellent team to be able to plan. And then after the planning period, also contracted with Milestones to continue. We are now finishing up the first, going into the second year of implementation. There'll be 4 years of implementation. So it's important. This project in itself talks about the collaboration, but it also echoes the work that Elsa was talking about, because the project is based on the work out of SAMHSA called Project Launch that has been around for a while. Colorado had the opportunity in 2010 to receive a grant to support a local community to do project launch. And then in 2014 was selected again to do a grant through the state agency to do a state pilot around project launch. We learned from the city, or from the locale that did it. She sat at the table all the time. Then we worked together in partnership with similar advisors to be able to talk about how do you do what you do in your one community? How does Launch together, the private replication of this, do what they're going to do in 5 more communities? An amazing ability to go back and forth, lessons learned, be a little more flexible, learn from what the things that happened that were problematic in the government format, and move it into some more flexible, responsive kinds of activities. So we're very excited. We're one of the funders of Project Launch. We're very excited with the successes, and one of the great things about it, end of 5 years, we don't want it to fall off the face of the earth, but in collaboration again, looking for how we can identify policies that will make it go forward, funding streams, other opportunities from the lessons learned to be able to take the key pieces of Launch together to move forward.
Thank you. And Anne, Susan mentioned the DPS roadmap. Can you reflect on how that's played a vital role?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the DPS roadmap, it's really the roadmap, the Birth to 8 roadmap. And it's a collective vision really of how we support our children achieving in literacy. But I would also say for Denver, it's one of our goals to be a leading city in our nation on this particular goal as well, to be the most literate city in the nation. But for today, I think with the group that we have here, Bruce, I think what we really want to talk about is our shared learnings along the way, because it wasn't easy. This was a long time coming. I would say that for years, DPS had been fielding requests from the community to go earlier, right? Even before pre-K. It was about pre-K, but it was engaging the community in those earliest years as well. As funders coming to them, the responses that we were getting were a bit too vague for us to really move forward. We needed something a little bit more concrete. And so that was I'll just put some time frame around that. That was like 2014, 2015. And this perfect storm was really building, right? Of the mayor's charge and the mayor's office actually prioritizing early childhood. And DPS had launched the 2020 plan, where there were 5 major priorities. One of them was increasing the literacy rate by 3rd grade. Well, that has an obvious connection to the earliest years of life. And so when you have these 2 major entities in a community, talking about bringing a community together, I think as funders, we really looked at that and said, well, this is perfect, right? This is the perfect time. And what we need to do is really fund this moment and bring together the proper leadership to get that done. So the co-chairs for the Birth to 8 roadmap were made up of 2 school board members, and then a cabinet member from the mayor's office, and then we added a second cabinet member a bit later. But that really was, that leadership was key. That was the concreteness, Bruce, that we were looking for. And so the result was the Birth to 8 roadmap, and one that was developed for the community overall. And that roadmap is, it's audacious, it's big. It has 11 different recommendations for getting the work done, right? That's huge. But what's important about that is what you were saying earlier, Susan, and what you have said, Elsa, is that The funding community had already come together in this way to almost show up on a comprehensive early childhood systems map. Where are you funding? Where are you funding? Where are your interests? How do we make sure that we have this blanketed? And so the roadmap really does the same thing by welcoming community members and funders to find themselves in the work. So I think we're a good example, right? At the Ben and Luciana Walton Fund at the Walton Family Foundation, which you're going to be hearing a little bit more about Zoma Foundation as well. That's our newly launched foundation where this work is embedded. But we really drive, a lot of our work is driving towards less social emotional disparity by age 5. So a lot of that has to do with the prevention of child maltreatment. And we are a newer funder. We've been in the marketplace for 5 years. We were welcomed by the community that was already put together, and I feel like we continue to welcome a broader range of funders to find themselves on these maps, the DPS roadmap being one of those. So you don't have to specifically have one of your goals be driving towards children switching from learning to read to reading to learn. You can have other goals that you're driving toward, but oftentimes they contribute to a more collective vision. So I would say that that touches on the map itself, but also connects it back to the importance of that collaboration through a continuum of work.
And that continuum is so important to let funders know where to plug in, as you said. And it reminds me of the anecdote, once you know one foundation, you know one foundation. So it's great to have that placeholder to allow people to participate. Well, let's shift to thinking about some of the key challenges that we have facing us, because we know this work is filled with daunting challenges, some of them environmental, some of them endemic. And Susan, I'll start with you to talk about a couple of the ones that you're most concerned about now.
I think that they do seem to evolve over time, but we have moved, along down the path, and some things have been solved to some extent, like having some governance, et cetera. But a key thing for all of us is the workforce. Not only are they poorly paid at this point in time, some well-prepared, some is not as well-prepared. We also have the problem of, so that also means high turnover rates, which is problematic, of course, in early childhood, which is dependent on relationships. And I think there's a statistic from our advocacy organization that, at least in Colorado, we're going to see a 40% increase in demand for early childhood professionals over the next 7 years as people continue to move into the state and as we have things like DPP, et cetera. So workforce, not the identification of workforce, the support and education and training of workforce, obviously figuring out how to pay workforce and how to keep them in the business so that we're benefiting from all their good skills is going to be something. And we're competing with other workforce right now, other people other entities that are trying to get to the same people. So huge workforce issue, I think, that we're just now beginning to think about doing some work on. The second thing, and this is something that's been around a while but clearly identified for all the work that's going on here and all these places that we're talking about in nonprofits, at the local level, at government entities, et cetera, you have to have leadership. You have to have well-trained leadership to do this work with the toolkit, with lots of tools in it to be able to do whatever the work is that you're being asked to do. Leadership is part of people, but there are also a lot of things that you can learn to do that. So we're beginning to have some real resonance around that. I'm going to brag just for a second to say we had a little insight at Buell about 10 years ago, so we are now with our 10th cohort of Buell Early Childhood leaders around the state, 20 at a time, a year-long program, master's level halfway to a certificate at the master's level halfway to to a master's degree. And happily, that's an example, not the only example, of some really strong leadership programs that are coming into Colorado to really help our leaders be prepared to lead with all these wonderful new opportunities.
That's great. Elsa, how about you?
Well, I have two that I would like to say that I've been thinking about and being concerned about, and I think are some that we'll have to address in the near future. One is we have a fabulous economy in Colorado, which means we have a lot of new people moving to Denver, one of the top housing markets in the country, all really great indicators, but not so great for low-income families. And so we are experiencing, like many other cities, a lot of gentrification. A lot of the really good work that we're seeing with Denver Public Schools is not going to be impacting these low-income children if we can't figure out how to keep them in the city. So we have a housing crisis that I think we still need to figure out, and affordable housing is at the core of that work. The second one is also very troubling for me, and that is immigration. Rose Community Foundation hosted a forum on immigration a couple of weeks ago, and heard from many communities at the state and the local level that are very concerned about what is happening. I know these are national issues, but the impact that it's having at the local level, that despite a lot of collaboration with government, a lot of possibilities of nonprofits being mobilized to address the issues of children, we heard awful stories, about families that are staying home for the weekend with their children, not attending church, not going to the park, minimizing the time that they get out of their homes, because the reality is that parents have been deported, when they are dropping off children at school. And so I'm very concerned about the fact that we can't figure out how to solve this at the national level, and I don't think we can do much here. But there are some things that we need to address at the local level. The long-term impact of children living in fear is of great concern for everything that we have said today. And I think it is a call to action that we have to figure this out at the local level.
Definitely two key macro issues, and I would say the issue of displacement may be more acute in Denver than some cities, but I think everybody from an urban district is probably dealing with that right now all over the country. And if we don't get our arms around it and figure out what to do about it, we'll have lost this incredible opportunity to create socioeconomically diverse classrooms, ECE all the way through K-12, which we know lift the boats for all kids. And we've got this opportunity, and you're right, Elsa, we just absolutely have to figure out how to preserve that. Anne, how about from your standpoint, some concerns?
Well, many. But I would also add data, Bruce. I would definitely add data because it's important to us to create a culture of learning. And how do you do that when data is siloed? You need to make those connections, really. You need to make them in the local government as well as the state government. And I think that we have issues along the way here in Colorado. And an example of that could be in some of our counties, we have, even within the Human Services division, we might have 5 different platforms that are collecting data that can't speak to one another. How do we then move the needle? How do we know that what we are doing is working, right? And then we have made some advancements with MOUs between the Human Service Department and the CDE, the Department of Education. But still, we have room to grow so that we can understand the work that we're doing in the earlier years, how that actually plays out in efficiencies and effectiveness for cost savings in the later years. And with data, so there are some things that we need to do from connecting those data sets for analyzing and updating technology. And I would say technology is another one of those challenges. And when I say that, it doesn't just pertain to data. It also pertains to how are we reaching families where they're at now. It's a different world. We're busy people. We're busy parents. And in order for us to actually achieve the impact that we want to achieve, accelerate that impact, we really have to take a look at the role of technology. And I'll stop there.
Well, it's a great point. If you think about the 0 to 8 continuum, there's at least 3 transitions from parents to early childhood providers to the public school system. And so not only breaking down those silos, but providing that data across the continuum. And you're right, Ann. It's not only important for us as funders, that data, but as we like to believe, for the service providers too. They need to know if what they're doing is working and use data to continuously improve and deepen the level of impact they're having with kids. And frankly, for policy providers to know that as we know, that data exists and proves that this is the best investment public dollars could possibly make to compel pay for success or some government funding of some of these services that we know are the right things to do with our children. Well, finally, let's shift gears on a more positive note and start talking about some of the opportunities we see here in the near-term future. And one of the ways we've framed funder roles around these opportunities is the slide in front of you to talk about the level of opportunity in 4 different boxes. And Ann, why don't you start with Catalyze and Innovate and explain what that means?
Absolutely. Innovation is a big part of our philanthropic approach and our gift to the greater community. I would say one good example of that, Bruce, is pay for success. The newer financial mechanisms and approaches that we are piloting here in Colorado as really, oftentimes it's a bridge between the reactive to the proactive, and that's a place where we can play philanthropically to take a bit more of that risk position in these newer financial mechanisms that we are bringing about. So, yeah, I would say that's a good example of being innovative and catalytic.
That's a terrific example. And Elsa, how about Collaborate?
Collaborate. I think the latest example that I can give you about collaboration is that Colorado has been proactively working on 2Gen. We partner with the Aspen Institute with Ascend to become that test state to develop a statewide plan around 2Gen. And we have the plan. We have the partnership with the government agencies. We have the partnerships with the nonprofit organizations. And we have been now lucky enough to get a grant so that we can have a staff position that is now at the governor's office. Mm-hmm. And now she will be able to move forward with the plan, with a collaboration with the steering committee to really move into implementing 2Gen. Because we know in early childhood, like we have learned also through the grade level reading campaign, that parents are instrumental, and we have to reach both generations if we really want to make significant changes.
That's great. And Susan, we know all this work we do in trying to advance the field, if we don't sustain the efforts and figure out a way to sustain it a long time, it's for naught. So discuss the perpetuate box for us.
Well, sustainability, of course, is a really important thing, and continuity. I think we hold the vision. We have the opportunity to hold the vision across, for example, administrations. In Colorado, we'll be looking in about 18 months at a brand new administration. And we are actively working to begin to talk to candidates, et cetera, to try and ease the bump in the road of new people in some very key organizations, as well as plans and thinking about, through various mechanisms, sustainability coming off of our race to the top. So I think we're mindful of that very important role that maybe we uniquely can play because we're here and we're going to be here in the future.
Absolutely. And I'll end by talking about the educate and advocate box. At some point, obviously, funding becomes a ceiling to what we can do and to accomplish our mission here. And so we think as a funder, part of our role is an advocacy role, and it's an education role. We need to do outreach to the community, outreach to the public to bring them up to speed on the effectiveness and importance of this work. We need to continue to think about new ways to advocate to our legislature. For example, we just brought the Council for Strong America to Colorado. Council for Strong America is an advocacy group that talks through business leaders and generals and military leaders and frames early childhood education and early literacy in terms of importance for workforce and national security issues. This obviously appeals to Republican legislators and makes them more aligned and allows them to collaborate with Democrats. And what we really hope the consequences all this is in Colorado is in the next 5 years for us to be able to launch a initiated ballot to bring significant new resources into early childhood education and that K through 3 early literacy space. So with that, I'd love to thank the panel for all your insights today, and thank you, the audience, and hope you enjoy your stay in Denver.